Chapter 12. The Minister's Giver. Walking in the shadow of a room, as it were, and perhaps actually under the influence of a species of somnambulism, Mr. Dinsdale reached the spot where, now so long since, Hester Prynne had lived throughout her first hour of public ignominy. The same platform or scaffold, black and weather-stained with the stern of sunshine of 7 long years, and foot-worn too, with the tread of many sculptors who had since unsentient remained standing beneath the balcony of the Mirren house. The minister went up the steps. It was an experienced night of early May. An unburied pall of cloud melted the whole expanse of sky from zenith to horizon. If the same multitude which had stood as eyewitnesses while Hester Prynne sustained her punishment could now have been summoned forth, they would have discerned no face about the platform, nor hardly the outline of human shape in the dark grey of the midnight. But the town was all asleep. There was no prelude of discovery. The minister might stand there, if it so pleased him, until morning should renew the haste, without other risks that the darkened and chill night air will creep into his frame, and stiffen his joints with remembrance, and cloud his throat with cataract and cloud, thereby defrauding the expectant audience of the tomorrow's prayer and sermon. No eye could see him, save that ever wakeful one which had seen him in his closet, wielding the bloody scourge. Why, then, had he came hither? Was it but the mockery of penitence? A mockery indeed, but in which his soul trifled with itself. A mockery at which angels blushed and kept, while for pains rejoiced, with jury and ladder. He had been driven hither by the impulse of that remorse which dogged him everywhere, and whose own sister and closest liking companion was that cowardice which invariably drew him back, with a tremulous grip, which when the other impulse had hurried him to the verge of a disclosure. Poor miserable man! What right had infamy like his to burden himself with crime? Crime is for the iron nerved, who have had their choice either to endure it, or, if it is pressed too hard, to exert their fierce and savage strength for a good purpose, and fling it off at once. This feeble and most sincere spirit could know neither, yet continually did one thing or another, which entering the same inextricable knot, the agony of heaven defending guilty beneath his repentance. And thus, while standing on the scaffold in this vain show of expiation, Mr. Dinsey was overcome with a great horror of mind, as if the universe were against a scarlet token on his naked breast. Right over his heart, on that spot in virtue there was and there had long been the gain and positionist too of Bailey Bent, without any force of his will or power to redress himself. He shrieked aloud, and outcried that went pealing through the night, and was bearing back from one house to another, and reverenced from the hills in the background, as if a company of devils, detecting so much misery and terror in it, had made a plenty of the sound, and were bending it to and fro. "It is done," muttered the minister, covering his face with his hands. "The whole town will awake and hurry forth, and find me here." But it was not so. The shaker had perhaps sounded with a far greater power to his own startled ears than it actually possessed. The town did not awake, or if it did, the drowsy slumberers mistook the cry either for something frightful in a dream, or for the noise of witches, whose voices at that period were often heard to pass over the stillness of the lonely cottage. As they rode, we sat and saw the clergyman therefore hearing no symptoms of disturbance, uncovered his eyes and looked about him. At one of the chamber windows of Governor Bellingham's mansion, which stood at some distance on the line of another street, he beheld the appearance of the old magistrate himself, with a lamp in his hand, a white nightcap on his head, and a long white gown enveloping his figure. He looked like a ghost, evoked unceasingly from the grave. The cry had eventually startled him. At another window of the same house, moreover, appeared old Mistress O'Higgins, the governor's sister, also with a lamp, which even thus, far off revealing the expression of her stern, discontented face, she transferred her heart from the lattice and looked anxiously upward. Beyond the shadow of a doubt, his venerable wit lady had heard Mr. Lindsay's outcry, and interpreted with it multitudinous echoes and reverences, as the clamour of defence and knight hands, with whom he was well known to make excursions into the forest. Detecting the gleam of Governor Bellingham's lamp, the old lady quickly extinguished her own and vanished. Possibly she went up among the clouds. The minister saw nothing further of her motions. The magistrate, after a wary observation of the darkness, into which nevertheless he could see but little farther than he might into a millstone, returned from the window. The minister grew comparatively calm; his eyes, however, were soon greeted by a little, glimmering light which, at first a long way off, was approaching up the street. It threw a gleam of recognition on her and stopped. A post, and there a garden fence, and here a lattice window pane, and there a pump, with its full trough of water, and here again an arched door of oak, with an iron knocker and door lock for the doorstep. The Reverend Mr. Disney noted all these minute particulars, meanwhile firmly convinced that the dawn of his existence was still nowhere in the footsteps which he now heard, and that the gleam of Delaware would follow him in a few moments more and reveal his own higher secret. As the light drew nearer, he beheld, within its illuminated circle, his brother clergyman, or to speak more accurately, his professional father as well as highly valued friend, the Reverend Mr. Wilson, who, as Mr. Disdale has conjectured, has been had been praying at the bedside of some dying man. And so he had the good old minister came freshly from the death chamber of Governor Winthrop, who had passed from earth to heaven within that very hour, and now surrounded like the saint like personage of all the times, with a radiant halo that glorified him even this lonely night of sin, as if the departed governor had left him an inheritance of his glory, or as if he had caught upon himself the distant shine of the celestial city, while looking the tearherds to see the triumphant pilgrim pass within its gates. Now, in short, good Father Wilson was moving homeward, aiding his footsteps with a lighted lantern. The glimmer of this luminary suggests the above consent to Mr. Denton, who smiled, nay, almost laughed at them, and then wondered if he were going mad. As the Reverend Mr. Wilson passed beside the scaffold, closely muffling his Geneva cloak above him with one arm, and holding the lantern before his breast with the other, the minister could hardly restrain himself from speaking. "A good a good evening to you, Baron Father Wilson. Come up hither and pray you, and pass a pleasant hour with me." Good heavens, had Mr. Lindsay actually spoken? For one instant he believed that these words had passed his lips, but they were uttered only within his imagination. The venerable Father Wilson continued to step slowly onward, looking carefully at the muddy pathway before his feet, and never once turning his head toward the guilty platform, when the light of the glimmering lantern had faded quite away. The minister discovered by the defendants which came over him that the last few moments had been a crisis of terrible anxiety. Although his mind had made an involuntary effort to relieve itself by a kind of lurid playfulness, shortly afterwards the like grisly sense of humour is again stolen among the solemn phantoms of his soul. He felt his limbs growing stiff with the unaccustomed chilliness of the night, and doubted whether he should be able to descend the stairs of the scaffold. Morning will break, and find him there. The neighbourhood will begin to rouse itself. The earliest rise, coming for in the dim twilight, will perceive a vaguely defined figure aloft on the place of shame, and, half-crazed but with around curiosity, will go, knowing from door to door, summoning all the people to behold the ghost, as he needs must think it, of son of the transgressor. A dusky tumult will flap its wings from one house to another. Then the morning light still blazing stronger. Old patriarchs will rise up in great haste, each in his flame gown, and mattering dames, without pausing to put off their night wear. They will treat the whole tribe of decorous personages who had never heretofore been seen with a single hair of their heads awry, will stare into public view with the disorder of a nightmare in their aspect. Old Governor Bellingham will come really forth, with his King James ruff fastened at and Mistress Higgins, with some things of the forest clinging to her skirts, and looking sorrier than ever, as having hardly got a wink of sleep after her night ride, and good Father Wilson, too, after spending half the night at that bed, and liking ill to be disturbed, thus early out of his dreams about the glorified saint. Heather likewise welcomed the elders and deacons of Mr. Disney Church, and the young virgins who so idolized their minister and had made a shield for him in their white bosoms, which now by the by, in their hurry and confusion they will scarcely have given themselves time to cover with their kerchiefs. Old people, in a word, will come stumbling over their threshold and turning up their amazed and horror-stricken visages around the scaffold. Whom will they discern there, with the red stern lie upon his brow? Whom but the reverend Arthur Dimmesdale had frozen to death, overwhelmed with shame, and standing where Hester Prynne had stood. Carried away by the grotesque horror of this picture, the minister onwards on to his own infernal alarm, burst into a great peal of laughter. It was immediately responded to by a light, early, childish loud, in which, with a thrill of heart, but he knew not whether of schizoid pain, of pleasure or as acute, he recognized the tone of the little bear. "Fair little bear," cried he, after a moment's pause. Then, through raising his voice, "Hester Prynne, are you there?" "Yes, it's Hester Prynne," she replied, in a tone of surprise, saying the minister heard her footsteps approaching from the sidewalk along which he had been pacing. "It is I, and my little bear." "Whence come you, Hester?" asked the minister. "What sent you hither?" "I have been watching at a death-bed," answered Hester Prynne, "at Governor Winthrop's death-bed, and have taken his measure for a rope, and am now going homeward to my dwelling." "Come not hither, Hester, felt a little better," said the Reverend Mr. Lindsay. "Ye have both been here before, but I was not with you. Come on hither once again, and we will stand all three together." She silently ascended the steps, and stood on the platform, holding little Pierre by the hand. The minister felt for the child's other hand, and took it. The moment that he did so, there came what seemed a tumultuous rush of new life, other life than his own, pouring like a torrent into his heart, and hurrying through all his veins. as if the mother and the child were communicating their vital warmth to his half-protein system. The tree forgotten an electric chain. Minister, whispered little Bear. What was to say, child? Asked Mr. Disney. "We to stand here with mother and me to-morrow noontide?" inquired Bear. "Nay, not so, my little Bear," answered the minister, for while the new energy of the moment, or the ray of public exposure that had so long been the anguish of his life, had returned upon him, and he was already trembling at the confusion in which, with a strange joy, nevertheless, he now found himself. "Not so, my child. I shall indeed stay with thy mother and thee one other day, but not tomorrow." Prelude and attempted to pull away her hand, but the minister held it fast. "A moment longer, my child," said he. "But wilt thou promise?" asked Pearl, "to take my hand and mother's hand tomorrow noontide?" "Not then, Pearl," said the minister, "but another time." "And what another time?" persisted the child. "At the great judgment day," whispered the minister, and strangely enough the sense that he was a professional teacher of the throne impelled him to answer the child so. "Then and there, before the judgment still, thy mother and thou and I must stand together. By the daylight of this world shall not see our meeting." Paralleled again, but before Mr. Didn't have done speaking, a light gleamed far and wide over all the milky sky. It was doubtless caused by one of those meteors which the night watcher may so often observe burning out to west in the vacant region of the atmosphere. So powerful was its radiance that its through light illuminated the dancing medium of cloud bed with the sky and earth. The great veil widened like the dawn of an immense lamp. It showed the familiar sense of the street, with the distinctness of midday, but also with the awfulness that is always imparted to familiar objects by unaccustomed light. The wooden houses, with their urine stories and quintilife pickets, the doorsteps and threshold with the early grass spreading out about them, the garden plots black with freshly turned earth, the wheel track little warm, and even in the market-place, margined with green on the other side, all were visible but with a singularity of aspect that seemed to give another moral interpretation to the things of this world than they had ever borne before. And there stood the minister with his hands over his heart, and Hester Prynne with the embroidery glimmering on her bosom, and little Pearl herself assembled on the connecting link between those two. They stood in the noon of that strange and solemn splendor, as if it were the light that is to reveal all secrets and the daybreak that shall unite all who belong to one another. There was witchcraft in little Bear's eyes and her face as she gazed upward at the minister, where the naughty smile which made its expression frequently so elfish. She withdrew her hand from Mr. Disney and pointed across the street, but he clasped both his hands over his breast and cast his eyes toward the zenith. Nothing was more common in those days than to interpret all meteoric appearances and other natural phenomena that occurred with less regularity than the rising set of sun and moon, as so many revelations from a supernatural source, thus a blazing spear as so as word of flame, a bow or shift of arrows, seen in the midnight sky prefigured Indian warfare. Destiny was now to have been followed by a shower of crimson light, without whether any marked event, for good and evil, ever befell New England from its settlements down to Revolutionary times, of which the inhabitants had not been previously warned by some spectacle of his nature. Not seldom it had been seen by multitudes, Offering, however, its credible resting of the fate of some lonely-eyed witness, who beheld the wonder through the color manifold and discerning medium of his imagination, and shaped it more distinctly in his father's thought. It was, indeed, a majestic idea that the destiny of nations should be relayed in these awful hieroglyphics on the cup of heaven. As crows so wide might not be deemed too expensive for province to write people's doom upon, the big house was a favorite one with our fathers, as betoken that their infant commonwealth was under a celestial guardianship of peculiar intimacy and strictness. But what should we say when an individual discovers a revelation addressed to him alone, on the same vast sheet of record? In such a case, it could only be the symptoms of a highly disordered mental state, when a man, rendered morbidly self-contemplative by long, intense and secret pain, had extended his egotism over the world expanse of nature, until the firmament itself should appear no more than a flat page for his own history and fate. We imputed it, therefore, solely to disease in his own eye, and heard the minister, looking upward to the saint, beheld there the appearance of an immense letter, the letter A, marked out in lines of dull red light. Not but the metal may have shown itself at that point, burning duskily through a veiled cloud, but with such shape as his guilty imagination gave it, or at least with so little definiteness that another guilt might have seen another stumble in it. There was a singular circumstance that characterized Mr. Dudley's psychological state at this moment. All the time that he gazed upward at the saint, he was nevertheless perfectly aware that little Pearl was pointing her finger towards old Roger Shuttleworth, who stood at no great distance from the scaffold. The minister appeared to see him, with the same glance that discerned the miraculous letter to his features as to all other objects. The meteoric light imparted a new expression, or it might well be that the physician was not careful then, as at all other times, to hide the malevolence with which he looked up his victim. Certainly, if the meteor kindled up the sky, and disclosed the earth with an awfulness that admonished his friend in the clarion of the day of judgment, then might Roger Shelford have passed with them for the Archman, standing there with a smile and skull, to claim his own. So vivid was the expression, or so intense the minister's perception of it, that it seemed still to remain painted up on the darkness, after the matter had vanished, with an effect as if the street and all the lights were at once annihilated. "Who is that man, Hester?" gasped Mr. Lindsay, overcome with terror. I shivered at him. "Dost thou know the man?" "I hate him, Hester." She remembered her oath and was silent. "I tell thee, my soul shivers at him," muttered the minister again. "Who is he? Who is he? Canst thou do nothing for me? I have a nameless horror of the man. "Minister," said Elizabeth, "I can tell thee who he is." "Quickly, then, child," said the minister, bending his ear close to her lips. "Quickly, and as low as thou canst whisper." Pearl mumbled something into his ear that sounded in the like human language, but was only such gibberish as children may be heard amusing themselves with, by the hour together. At all events, if it involved any secret information in regard to how old Roger Shuttleworth, it was in a tongue unknown to the erudite Claremont, and did but increase the bewilderment of his mind. The elfish child then laughed aloud. "Dost thou mock me now?" said the minister. "Thou wast not bold. Thou wast not true," answered the child. "Thou wast not promised to take my hand and another hand, tomorrow noontide. What is there?" said the physician, who had now advanced to the foot of the platform. "Precious Master Dinsdale, can this be you? Well, well, indeed. We men of study, whose heads are in our books, have need to be strictly looked after. He dream in our waking moments and walk in our sleep. Come, good sir, and my dear friend, I pray you, let me lead you home." "How knewest thou that I was here?" asked the minister fiercely. "Verily, and in good faith," answered Roger Shuttleworth, "I knew nothing of the matter. I had spent the better part of the night at the bedside of the worshipful Governor Winthrop, doing what my poor Scarlet might me to give him ease. He going home to a better world. I likewise was on my way homeward when this strange light shone out. Come with me, I beseech you, reverend sir, else you will be barely able to do Sabbath duty tomorrow. Aha, see now how they trouble the brain. This book. You should sterilize, good sir, and take a little pastime, or this night wind says will run up you. I will go with I will go home with you, said Mr. Disney, with a shout desperately like one awing or nevertheless from an ugly dream. He yelled himself to a physician and was led away. The next day, however, being the Sabbath, he preached at this church which was held to be the richest and most powerful, and the most replete with heavenly influences, that had ever proceeded from his lips. Souls, it is said, more souls than one, were brought to the throne by the efficacy of the sermon, and vowed with intentions to cherish a holy gratitude towards Mr. Jesus thought out the long hereafter, but as he came down the pulpit steps, the grey bird still met him holding up a black glove which the minister recognized as his own. "It was found," said the sexton, "this morning on the scaffold where evildoers are set up to public shame. Satan dropped it there, I take it, intending a scurrilous jest against your reverence, but indeed he was blind and foolish, as he ever and always is. A pure hand needs no glove to carry it." "Thank you, my good friend," said the minister gravely, but started at heart, for so confused was his remembrance, that he had almost brought himself to look at the events of the past night as visionary. "Yes, it seems to be my glove indeed. And since Satan saw fit to steal it, your reverence must needs handle without gloves. Kings henceforward," remarked the old assistant, grimly smiling. "But did your reverence hear of the portent that was seen last night? A great red letter in the sky, the letter A, which we interpret to stand for angel. For as our good Governor Withrow was made an angel this past night, it was doubtless held fit that there should be some notice thereof." "No," answered the minister, "I have not heard of it."